A cold wind cut through the narrow streets as the last rays of sun slipped behind the old factories on the edge of the town. 8-year-old Sammy held his broken toy truck in both hands, its wheels hanging loose, the metal dented where it had been stomped on. His lower lip trembled, and his eyes were red from crying, but he tried to stay quiet as he walked beside his mother. His mother, Maria, kept one hand on his shoulder, though her own breathing was uneven. A dark bruise was already forming near her cheekbone, the aftershock of the blow she had taken trying to shield her son. She didn't want Sammy to see her pain, so she kept her face turned away, but the boy had seen everything. He had heard the laughter, the taunts, the way the factory guards shoved her as if she were nothing. "Mama, I'm sorry," Sammy whispered. "No, sweetheart," Maria answered softly. "You didn't do anything wrong. They're the ones who should be sorry." But her voice wavered, and Sammy could hear it. They had come only to pick up Maria's overdue wages, just a simple visit, one she had been forced to make because the factory hadn't paid its workers for a month. Instead, the guards at the gate, rough men hired to keep order, had pushed her aside when she asked questions. Sammy, clutching his toy truck, had stepped forward, trying to defend her in the only way a child could. That was when one of the guards snatched the toy from him. "Look at this!" The man had laughed, dangling it by the back wheels. "Baby boy's car!" Sammy had shouted, begged for it back, and the guard had smashed it against the iron gate before tossing it to the ground and stepping on it. Maria had rushed forward, furious. "Don't you touch my son's—" But she hadn't finished her sentence. A guard had slapped her so hard she fell to her knees. Sammy still heard the sound, a crack like a branch breaking. Now they walked in silence, away from the factory down the dirt road that led toward the old biker lodge on the hill. The building looked intimidating to most people, low, wide, and painted in black, but Sammy wasn't afraid of the men there, not because he knew them, but because he had overheard the stories. People said the Black Vipers were dangerous, but fair. They protected the weak, helped families who had been hurt by the same factory that had hurt Sammy and his mom. Maria didn't want to involve them. She believed trouble only made more trouble, but Sammy was too shaken to stay quiet. "Mama, why did they hit you?" he whispered. "Why did they break my toy?" Maria stopped walking. She knelt in front of him, ignoring the pain in her cheek, and tried to smile. "Because some people forget they are human," she said. "But you don't ever forget, okay? You stay good, you stay brave." A tear rolled down Sammy's cheek. "But it hurts. And you're hurt too." She brushed his hair back gently. "We'll be okay. We always are." But just then, the growl of motorcycle engines echoed from up the hill, heavy, thunderous, and growing louder. Sammy looked up. The Black Vipers were coming down the road, their headlights cutting through the dusk like white fire. Maria swallowed hard. She didn't want them dragged into this, but fate didn't seem to care. The first bike stopped beside them. Its rider, a tall, broad man named Rafe, lowered his helmet. His scarred eyebrow lifted when he saw Maria's bruised face and the broken toy clutched to Sammy's chest. "Who did that?" Rafe asked, his voice low but sharp as steel. Maria shook her head quickly. "It's nothing. We're fine, please." Sammy looked up at him with trembling courage. "They broke my toy, and they hit my mom," he whispered. The other bikers slowed behind Rafe, listening. Rafe's jaw tightened. "Who?" Sammy pointed toward the factory down the road. His hand shook, but he still pointed. Rafe turned toward the building, the fading light reflecting off his dark sunglasses. "Boys," he said quietly. The engines behind him rumbled in response. "We're riding to the factory." The roar of the motorcycles faded into the distance as the bikers rode toward the factory, but Maria and Sammy stood frozen on the side of the road. The dust the bikes kicked up drifted slowly over them, and Maria held her son close, unsure if she'd made a terrible mistake by allowing that single moment of truth to slip out. "Sammy, maybe we should go home," she murmured. But Sammy was staring down the road where the bikers had disappeared, his small hands gripping his broken toy even tighter. "Mama, they're going to help us, right?" Maria didn't answer. She didn't know. Life had taught her to be cautious, to avoid making enemies. The factory owners were powerful, ruthless men. And the bikers, though respected, were feared for a reason. "Let's get home first," she finally said. They walked in silence for several minutes, until the loud echo of distant shouting rolled across the fields. Maria froze. The sound came from the direction of the factory. "Mama, they're fighting?" Sammy whispered. Before Maria could respond, a familiar voice called from behind them. "Maria, wait!" It was Elena, Maria's neighbor, running down the path toward them. Her apron was still tied at her waist, and her hair was messy from rushing. "I heard what happened," Elena said breathlessly. "Someone saw you at the factory. They said the guards hit you." Maria tried to shake her head, but Elena grabbed her hand gently. "Don't hide it. You know lots of us have been hurt by them." She glanced down at Sammy and softened her tone. "Are you two okay?" Sammy nodded weakly. Elena noticed the broken toy and sighed. "Animals, that's what they are." Maria took a shaky breath. "Elena, the bikers saw us. They're going to the factory now." Elena's eyes widened. "All of them?" Maria nodded. Elena let out a long exhale, somewhere between fear and relief. Then maybe things are finally changing. Before Maria could respond, another sound filled the air, this time closer. The deep, growling rumble of bikes returning. Sammy clutched his mother's arm. "They're coming back." Elena stepped aside as the first bike appeared around the bend, moving slower this time, its headlights cutting the dusk in long, soft beams. Rafe was in the front again, but now his face was different. More focused, more serious. Behind him, more bikes rolled in, their engines lowering to a steady purr as they stopped in front of Maria. Rafe got off his bike and walked toward her, removing his sunglasses. His eyes were sharp but not unkind. "You should have told us sooner," he said quietly. Maria shook her head. "I didn't want trouble." "Trouble's already here," Rafe replied. "The factory's been hurting people for years. Your boy just made us see it again." Sammy looked up. "Did you talk to them?" Rafe paused. "We did more than talk." One of the other bikers, a thick-bearded man named Crow, stepped forward holding something in his hands. It was Sammy's toy truck, but not broken anymore. The bikers had repaired it, straightened the metal, tightened the loose wheels, cleaned the dents as best they could. It wasn't perfect, but it looked whole again. Sammy's mouth fell open. "My truck!" Crow crouched and held it out. "Good as new, kid." Sammy took it gently, turning it over in his hands. "Thank you." Crow smiled. "Don't thank me. Thank Rafe. He told us to fix it before we left the factory." Maria's heart warmed for a moment, until she saw the subtle bruises on Crow's knuckles, the dirt on Rafe's boots, and the torn sleeve of another biker. Something had definitely happened. What did you do?" Maria asked. Rafe didn't speak for a moment. The other bikers waited quietly. Finally, Rafe said, "We gave the guards a lesson in manners. They won't be touching you or anyone else again." Maria's breath caught. "Rafe, you can't just—" "Yes, we can," he interrupted calmly. "And we did." Elena folded her arms. "Good. Someone needed to—" Rafe looked back at his men. "But this isn't over. Those guards were just tools. The real rot is inside the factory." Sammy tugged on Rafe's vest. The biker looked down. "Are you going to stop the bad men too?" Sammy asked. Rafe kneeled so he was eye level with the boy. "We're thinking about it." Another biker spoke up from behind. "Boss, we can't let them get away with what they've been doing. Not after today." Rafe stood and turned to Maria. "Maria, we need to know exactly what happened, every detail, not just today, but all the times they didn't pay you, threatened you, or hurt anyone else." Maria hesitated. Talking meant becoming involved. It meant the bikers would do something bigger, something dangerous. But when she looked down at Sammy, at the bruise on her own cheek, and at the fishermen-turned-laborers, widows, and starving families the factory had tormented, for years, she realized something. Silence had never protected anyone. She inhaled deeply. "Come inside. I'll tell you everything." Rafe nodded once, firm and respectful. "We'll listen." The bikers parked their motorcycles and followed Maria and Sammy toward the small house at the end of the lane. The night was settling in, the wind growing colder, and somewhere far behind them, the lights of the factory flickered like a beast waiting to strike again. But this time, the town wasn't alone. This time, the bikers were ready, and the factory had no idea what was coming next. The night hummed with a tension that pressed into the bones. Inside Maria's small kitchen, lit by a lone lamp, she laid out every scrap of evidence she had: unpaid stubs, torn notices, the names of colleagues who had been threatened. The bikers sat around the table, crowd of leather and quiet determination. Rafe listened without interruption, his fingers steepled beneath his chin as Sammy clutched the repaired truck and circled his legs like a guardian. When Maria finished, there was a long silence. Rafe finally spoke. "We'll do this clean," he said. "No senseless violence. We're not the enemy. Corruption is." Elena, who had stayed to support Maria, glanced sharply at him. "How can you be sure the law will help? They own half the town's council." Rafe's jaw tightened. "We'll make sure the law has to look." They planned through the night who would talk to the lawyer in the city, who would gather witness statements, who would record testimonies, and, most importantly, how to protect the workers who still needed their jobs. The bikers used their network. Crow rode to the neighboring towns. A quiet mechanic in the lodge, Lena, used her contacts to find an honest reporter. By dawn,